First, I would like to thank everyone for coming here and for participating in this small but energetic spiritual community, Sangha. I also wanted to say that the Buddha Hall fundraising will begin early next year, possibly around March, sometime after the month-long Ango. And the other note that I've been given here is if you're making end-of-the-year contributions, if you do some of that, we have architectural fees to take care of, electrical upgrade for the entire temple, this building. Help us if you can with that. See if you can continue to help us. So ego algorithms. I have a few notes on it. Not that these aren't things that I might remember, but perhaps not. These are just very simple opinions. We use a structure to protect the self-centeredness, to reify, reinforce, and convince ourselves over and over and over that we're somebody going somewhere, making some successes and having some failures, and sometimes blaming ourselves a little, but that's also ego. You're not at fault for anything. If you think you are, you're confused. Perhaps even deluded, more than likely deluded. Conclusions, ideas, personal formulas or structures, algorithms, and phrase fillers. In other words, this is one. Anytime you tune into these, eventually they'll drive you crazy just listening to not only to your own algorithm or your own phrase filler algorithms, but also others. Some people are brilliant people and still say between every third sentence. It is about being aware of those, not about correcting them, because if you try to correct them, you might succeed, but then that kind of energy tends to turn over, lay sideways, go back in the shadows, and come out in another form. It has to be seen directly for it to completely let go. It will let go of its own. You don't have to do anything, but be aware of it. Is one. Phrase filler, know what I'm saying is another one. Right. If you notice that some people will say, make a sentence and then say, right, asking a question at the end. And these people seem to be, might be you, might be me, seem to be very confident, but yet they're always asking for confirmation by saying, right. I bought a blue car instead of red car, and then I traded the red car back in for a green car because, of course, everybody knows that green is safer, right? Right? They don't really want you to respond. They just want to say that. When I say they, I mean me. I do this, right? Right. I have several that I'm sure you hear them. When I bring this up, you'll notice that I'm doing that, and it's not about correcting it. That's so important. I don't know how else to say it. It's how can I say it? You could help me with questions here. You don't have to start yet. Well, if you want to, then go ahead, right? You know what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? There's another, what is it? Some of the other, well, now here, look. Well, now look. That's, people sometimes start out, you can tell that someone is going right from the receiving, because they know they're talking to someone, they're going from the receiving of what is in front of them, who is in front of them, that there's someone listening to what you're saying. And if you are not listening to what you're saying, then you will continue to reinforce these algorithms in very subtle ways that are very difficult to see. And they're also, if you do begin to see them, the temptation, the impulse is to just try to stop it or change it or be different or not do that, not have that feeling. Familiar? We're all doing this, talking to our phones and then talking to our egos. When we are not really tuned into what we are producing, it is indicative that we are not really receiving either. We just talk away, filling up the space with our self-centeredness and greediness. Disagree with me. show me, or show me how this is. I'm having a misunderstanding here. Right? Yes. Wrong.
So this is something I say before I speak sometimes. So
yeah. So
there's certain people in my life who seem to need some kind of signal so they can start paying attention. Because otherwise it takes them a while to listen. So is that appropriate?
Is it appropriate? Is it what?
Appropriate.
Yes. I don't know. Is it? What does he want to know?
Sokuzan was wondering if some phrase fillers at the beginning have a function, and if you're aware of them, is that still appropriate to use them, or should we try not to use them?
I think it's, if you want to try something, try to be aware of what's happening rather than trying to control or stop what's happening, because there's so much energy that there are no off switches for, but there. And if you push on that or try to make it stop, because the ego mind thinks, in some cases, that we have some say-so there. If we could just stop that feeling, we might have an intellectual understanding that we're going in circles, or that we're that this is we can see that this just isn't appropriate to do this. So we go in and think that it should stop, or we should stop, or get control of ourselves. And so, coming back to your question, I would say situational. There are times when it's completely appropriate and in line with receiving, or in line with what is being taught, to just be aware of this amazing illusion that looks like this and other people. It's an astonishing realization, and it won't, if you realize what this is, you won't necessarily know it. You won't know it as some kind of aha or conclusion that you can, well, now that I've got that, I'll just be all right from now on. Is that funny? Somewhat.
I find myself ego reinforcing once I got rid of that habit.
Well, good for you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Andy Bowing, what is that energy behind the phrase fillers?
Fear. And the fear is of open space. We don't want that feeling of not knowing, or being weak, or not being right on top of things all the time. So we might develop a phrase filler. More about it if you have it. Let's go there.
That's all I have.
Mr. Bowing, it seems like sometimes if I'm in a conversation, I might tell myself to try to receive, almost like a reminder to receive, and it feels like that can get in the way of actually receiving. Is there a way to have an attitude of receiving that's not just a brick wall?
Yes. And it's one of the ways. I don't know if it's the only way. Of course, how would I know if it's the only way? That'd be quite an intense statement. But it looks like including things that are already here in the present moment, that come without necessarily being supported by thoughts, like how this feels, how your clothing feels, how your hands feel when they come together, how the feelings that are connected with just movement of the body. And also how you're receiving that. You're receiving how the color, in this case, mostly black or flesh tone or whatever you want to call it, but also the sounds. What is that sound that I'm hearing?
Air purifier.
An air purifier. So I left what I was hearing for, what is it? So it's being not staying with maintaining, but returning to very simple things that are in the, and I use this structure, not very much, but I could use it here, that are happening at the same time that you're endeavoring to receive what someone's saying. Listening to someone, you can also receive everything else that is coming through the sense fields. There are 5 sense fields other than the mind, which is also, I talk about it quite often as a sense field, as receiving thoughts. You're actually receiving thoughts. We don't really create. When you realize what this is, you realize you don't create thoughts. The thoughts are just independently arisen, and they're extremely powerful. You think artificial intelligence is powerful. Consciousness, way beyond that, if there is such a thing as beyond. So keeping it very simple, what you're doing is appropriate, to use that word, and then just to include other things at the same time. It's like widening your vision a little bit to include the texture, the color of the carpeting. At the same time, someone is saying something to you about their broken air conditioner, or the air conditioner that you broke because you let it fall off the shelf or something. Or
sometimes when I try that, it feels like everything goes fuzzy. There's a lack of crispness.
that's it. That's awareness. If you're looking for crispness, this is ego. Anytime anything arises and you're looking for something else, or for that to be different than it is, this is the very nature of the conscious, the part of consciousness that it goes into hiding in some way, or stays back and is paranoid. More
seems tied with this, that feels like my memory has gotten a lot worse since I started meditating.
You just are starting to remember how much you forgot. I'm not kidding. Why would I kid? Go ahead.
It feels discouraging, like I'm going crazy sometimes. Is there any practically it can get in the way of things sometimes?
Yes.
Forget something someone told me. I don't know what to ask about it.
Well, you say you feel like you're going crazy. I'm already crazy. I've never recovered from that, and don't need to. I don't know. I would appreciate any questions around what I just said. If you have them, if you don't, that's fine too. It's already crazy and sane are more polarities. They're the same and they're different. They're differentiated, but they're the same. Just like confusion and clarity, just like Buddha nature or Buddha's ascension beings, not two different things.
Is there something about meditation that is causing me to have a worse memory?
I would say meditation, sitting meditation, is helping you to see more clearly the way all of your thinking processes, your mind, your memory, your tendency to do this or that, or move this way or that way, or go into this opinion or that opinion, or this structure or that structure. You're more aware that is happening, and you see more and more that there's not a solid being, that being that thinks he, she, they are doing that needs reinforcement, either by failure, or success, or I don't know which way I'm going, or I'm confused. Trying to get rid of confusion is the very nature, second noble truth. Wanting things to be different than they are. A willingness to blame some specific thing when actually the specific thing you're pointing at is not separate from an incredible, I use the term avalanche, that has been going on way before any of us were even born. Here it is again, showing up again in the form of living beings. Living beings at war, living beings at peace, living beings in some kind of netherworld. More. Sure.
And phrase fillers function as pointing at something, particularly with an intention to, so to speak, turn on the light bulb in somebody's head.
Maybe. Somewhat. they actually start out being very appropriate, and then they kind of come apart as we begin to use them as some way to just blank out. Like, you know what I'm saying, or right, say something and then go right. You won't notice it when you first start to use it. If you're using it, being aware and you're conscious of it, it doesn't seem to be so helpful to help you turn away from observing what is arising in your mind stream or in the apparent mind stream of someone else through their language or through their body language and so on. It's when we start to shut down and use that as just kind of a hitching post, so we don't have to be so aware. It's painful to be aware because life is suffering, as the Buddha said 2,500 years ago. That's quite often misunderstood. Like that's nihilism, that should go away, or that shouldn't be there, or that's a misunderstanding. Go ahead.
Baoshan Bowing, when
You're
did you
next. Go ahead, Baoshan.
when did you first start referring to yourself as crazy, Bowing?
As soon as I realized I was,
Baoshan Bowing,
like years and years, decades ago.
how is that helpful to refer to yourself as crazy, Bowing?
It's when I say that, I'm just using the idea that you can't really basically understand what this is using logic or reason, or even though that's very interesting to me to hear when someone uses those structures to point to this or point to that, but to latch on to anything is insane, because it is insane because it causes the ego mind to hyperventilate. It's a way of talking about just overdo something. And it's crazy to think that you can continue to function this way with the idea of like blaming someone is going to help you feel better. Is your feeling, and not being responsible, not ego, but the consciousness. You have some kind of feeling or emotion, whether it's physical or mental, spiritual, psychological, whatever direction you want to go with it, and think that someone else is causing that they are to blame for that. It's crazy. More?
Baoshan Bowing, so are you saying that it is functioning as a sort of an ego release valve, Bowing?
What do you mean by that?
Baoshan Bowing, like it takes the energy out of ego?
How so?
I don't know, I'm asking.
I'm asking too.
It seems like it takes taking yourself too seriously, then the wind and the energy away from it.
Yeah, could be.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sokuzan, if we notice a phrase filler or anything else that's covering up an energy like fear, you say don't fix it. You have to see it directly. How do we see an energy directly while we're covering it up?
Just continue to look at it. Don't look for success so much as just look at it. And anytime you look, or anytime you're on receive, whatever you're receiving can change or shift or make different movements or energy or textures or so on. But fundamentally, it's still the same thing. So it's both different things showing up and the same thing. So we tend to try to find some kind of reference point there. We wanted to stop doing that, or we want to add something to it. If you took the four karmas of pacifying, enriching, magnetizing, and destroying, you could reverse those out and have them go the opposite direction. And we tend to do that right momentarily, right in the instance we're in. We will try to we might be endeavoring to pacify and then just suddenly shift over to something else without deciding that or without making any decision about it. And that's kind of what's happening in the area that you seem to be asking about. There's no one has a say-so in there. Consciousness is doing that. It just looks like a person that can succeed or fail. And in the relative world, the mundane world, of course, it's the success and failure is just supercharged with you need to get better. You need to improve, or you need to stop doing this or start doing that. And then that is basically ignoring the fundamental nature of dependent origination, which is you can't figure this out. But if you see it, then you'll see that what you're looking at is not a bunch of parts all put together. It's just this. You can't, it's so much less this that you can't even say it's one thing. Even though some teachers might say that we're all one. And I think that, I don't know how helpful that is. It's such a strong concept. And what we're looking at in front of us is no, it's not. It's all over the place. Everywhere I look, as soon as I look at any one of you, I know you. I sense your style, your personality, the way you manipulate, the way you cover up, the way you work with your anger, the way you work with your passion, aggression, ignorance. I can't fix it. I can't fix this one either. And I'm not particularly trying to. Well, I guess I did try a little bit this morning to fix myself, didn't I? You don't know? Just thinking about something else. Go ahead.
Music bowing, does it cover up, alter or change the energy it's trying to cover up?
Say more. What do you want to know?
I want to know if the energy is still there, just it's harder to see, or I'm distracting myself, or if it actually changes.
Well, the illusion of change is still there. The illusion is still there, and you're still deluded by it. If you think you have some say so, or if you think you have no say so, you take any position on any of it. This is the illusion that we are deluded by into thinking that we can stop it, start it, or that someone's causing how we feel. And so that is an illusion. There isn't anything to fix or change. Kind of leaves you hanging out to dry, doesn't it? Ondo.
Ondo line, is awareness itself suffering? In other words, we have the ego suffering, but then like what Junshi was talking about, the awareness that's.
Awareness is just we're taking an aspect of what we're calling consciousness, and then if it's in a particular area of some object arising in consciousness, then there's awareness of that object. So if we want it, or if we don't want it, or if we're trying to do anything with it, manipulate it. Sometimes it's referred to as materialism. We want to get it to get larger, get smaller, turn this color, that color, this shape, to do this, do that, and the failure of not being able to do that is suffering. Not getting our way, second noble truth, wanting things to be different, simply put. And you could go on and talk about that in so many different dynamics are going on. Go ahead.
Well, Divine, it seems like that's all egocentric. Is there another level of suffering that is just there's just dependently originated, that suffering shows up?
When you start receiving the suffering of everything, that's a different level of suffering. When everything is when you are suffering everything, it's no longer your personal suffering, nor is it different from that. This is why there is what's called the Bodhisattva path, the Bodhisattva vow, to be with all things, save all beings, put others' suffering and discomfort before your own. That's very, very hard to do. We have to start somewhere. So we start by not fighting with our own situation. And how do we do that? We have to really witness it and look at it and see that we're helpless in that area. Yeah.
Divine, what is it about that failure that helps us see more clearly?
Because it starts to show up that which is failing is unreal. That part of consciousness that is somebody that there's no substance there. But you won't know that unless you spent a lot of time watching the consciousness produce this, produce that, reduce, produce, run around in circles. You have to watch that for a while to see that just is dependently arisen. It's not even personal at all, though it can feel and look and smell and taste very, very personal. It's your fingertips. It's your mind stream that is really upset with this or that, maybe even enraged about it. We just have to receive it. Heartbreaking to do that, because we see that it's a spiritual path. It's a path of transcendence. It's not a path of having the right political party, though it can look like it very, very intensely. And I'm not saying we need to go to the mountaintop and nobody participates in society. No, it's the other way around. You need to participate right in the society we're in. Watch the news if you can. Speaking of Sanho. Go ahead, Sanho.
SokukoJi. It seems to me that people who are not involved with an awareness practice are sometimes very uncomfortable when you're not engaging in the socialized behaviors that are expected.
Yes.
The behavioral fillers. I wonder, how do we work with their discomfort around our practice, SokukoJi?
Well, it would be very situational, but you would just receive as much as you can and ask them how they're doing. Ask them how they're working with it. They might mistake your interest in that you're going to do what they say or side with their opinion or their feeling, but you can be curious about it. And in some area, in other words, you're somewhat pacifying that, but you're receiving it rather than engaging in some kind of argument about it. What's happening in the culture and the politics right now has been going on for centuries and centuries. Just showing up in different uniforms and but it's the same kind of crazy, insane energy that is trying to control other people, control whole nations, whole cultures by right and wrong, right and wrong, should and shouldn't, sacred and profane, and just on and on and on. So it would be a situation with you. So you're talking to someone, you're interacting with someone that has no mind training. Some people that have no mind training at all are quite reasonable about and are quite clear about what's going on and aren't bringing a lot of aggression into that. But if someone is being swamped by the polarity there, then about all you can do is listen. They're about to listen to you so much, maybe a little bit. More about that, Sanho? Receiving is good. Milka.
Milka bowing. In Chazon's talk, he brought up that you had mentioned gullibility.
Yes.
And if we're endeavoring to see what that is there suffering that shows up in that?
What do I want to know?
How does that take us, say, to an undifferentiated or deeper,
Yes.
wider level of seeing what's happening in a situation?
So the way I was using gullibility is kind of, it might feel like that in the ego mind, but I'm saying just give things the benefit of the doubt, even though they sound a little off or a little you're not really lined up with what is even being said there. So when I'm saying gullible, it's not exactly gullible. I don't know if there's a word for it, but other than receive what is happening there without immediately coming up with our preconception, our judgments, just like I was reading the algorithms of ego, without just immediately come up with that can't be true, or that because those are these people, and now those people don't believe this, and that whole culture is against this or for that. We immediately go into all of the algorithms of culture that just create a structure of right and wrong, up and down, back and forth. And some of those structures are very, very good. You shouldn't murder people because you don't like them, or you shouldn't torture them. Like the whole thing, I think I just heard on the news where they still have not concluded that keeping someone from sleeping is a torture. Obviously, that's torture. But there's something there. I don't know where it was at. That there's still some kind of assumption that that's not particularly harmful to people. Of course, unless it's happening to you. I don't know if you can live very long without sleep. Has anybody heard that? I don't know. More? Okay.
Milk buying, similar area along with phrase fillers. You were talking about phrase fillers of the speaker when we are listening to someone and we immediately say something like uh-huh or right or agree, affirm what's being said. How does that cover up what's actually happening?
I'd like to ask Munya to talk about that, because she's mentioned when she first started coming to a book study, one of the uncomfortable, and I should have you talk about it, that you noticed that people might be studying a book and you might make a comment, or someone may make a comment, and you notice that people don't necessarily give a bobbing head to everything. Everybody gives some kind of instant affirmation to any kind of statements. Could you say a little bit about that?
Kind of bowing. It's both wanting affirmation from after I've said something, but it's also wanting to give affirmation, to endeavor to make someone, in my perception, feel more comfortable with or have been approved of what has been said, especially a new person in a group.
Yes, people that join book study will notice that right away, that someone will look right at you in book study, and even though you just said something, and they may not say something or not say something. I knew you were going to ask a question, Sano. Go ahead.
Talk about what is that when we look at someone and we don't validate them? Is that respect?
I don't know. Say more. How would you say? Does it seem like that to you? This is where I'm being gullible here.
To me, that seems like respect, not patting someone on the head. But
well said.
It sometimes makes them really uncomfortable when I don't pat them on the head.
But that is revealing. They may not see it that may not see it that way, but that is really is showing them, if they're willing to receive it, that they're counting on some kind of a reference point that is artificial, that is made up, that's invented, that is a parkalpada, an imaginary nature. At its one of its strongest positions is to get reinforcement from others. We do it in society. We're constantly reinforcing. This is why the Sangha is so difficult. You have a spiritual community where people are training their minds. You hopefully have a teacher that doesn't create more confusion for you, and a teaching that is helpful, and we all get together. We all know that this is both engaging and we want to be involved in this kind of a discussion, but it's also can be very difficult to be working with other people who are working with the material in a way that just is uncomfortable or doesn't. Sometimes we listen to people talk who have a better are better able to work with really difficult conceptual structures, especially in the Buddhist teaching. And this is why I say often to people, you need to study it. You don't have to understand it, because everyone understands this differently. Not everyone is going to understand, let's say, really difficult teachings to be able to explain them to others so that everybody understands in the same way. Read Dogen for a while, for a couple of years. And then how are you going to write a book about what Dogen meant? People do that. Further?
Mark Bowing, you can die from lack of sleep. I just was far away from my computer. I didn't tell you.
You said, what did you just say, sir?
You can die from lack of sleep.
That's what. Yeah, thank you. I had heard that.
It's rare. It's very rare.
You wouldn't be comfortable.
Harrison Bowing.
Harrison, go ahead.
Some mind states like depression and anxiety are like debilitating and can prevent you from, or prevent me from, sort of engaging in daily life. Is there ever a place for transformation of emotions? Like Thich Nhat Hanh talks a lot about transforming energy after you like recognize that it's there. And then if there is a place for transformation, how do you know the time in which, or you can transform the energy from one to the other.
So with respect to your question and with respect to Thich Nhat Hanh, I don't teach that way. I teach out of how this looks to me. That doesn't mean that you or anyone, probably thousands of people, if I were to count it up, wouldn't get a lot of help or benefit from using that idea of transforming negative energy into positive, using that energy. After all, it's just energy. We all know that. Energy is energy, and sometimes it has a very difficult, sharp edges to it, and sometimes it's very fluffy and soft, but it's energy. So to go into it intellectually and try to depersonalize it and make use of the energy, in other words, transform it into goodness, I'm all for that, but I think it needs to happen on a deeper level where you don't even know about it. Because if you know about this, ego wants a credential, it wants credit, and it will, once it gets credit, then it's easier for the ego to kind of polish itself in such a way. It's like the word that comes up, the phrase that comes up, came up a little while ago, like polishing a, is it a bubble? Polishing a dewdrop. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, this energy that I'm endeavoring to point out is like a dewdrop. It has a very little duration, but when it's there, it's eternal. And so, not that Thich Nhat Hanh has a different audience than this teacher. And so you may need to look at it that way as transformation. This is quite often talked about in Tantra. I know I studied that for a while, still study it, still study everything. But transmuting energy from this into that, it's just we're still tied into a very strong belief in right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, positive, negative, neutral, and all of those other situations. Those are not different from each other. They just look like it. And that's part of the illusion we are deluded by. We want to go in and transform the illusion in the negative part of the illusion into a positive part, but you still have an illusion that you're deluded by. You think you've succeeded. You think you've gotten better. You think you're on the ninth bhumi. You think you're enlightened. You think that you used to have all these negative feelings, but because you've transformed those. And then if you're really strong about this, if you were unlucky enough to be born with a mind stream that is able to clamp down on right, able to clamp down on finally I found it, able to clamp down on what? Spiritual materialism, as it was taught by Trungpa Rinpoche. You could write books about it. You can teach others about it. You can start whole workshops on dream yoga. More, Harrison?
Thank you. Harrison bowing.
Less, Harrison? More or less, Harrison? Wulong. You were just praying? Okay.
Nikki, can you hear me?
Yes, Nikki.
First time here. I've been doing a lot of work about the spirit is one, all spirits are one, and in the last few weeks I've been having these experiences where I'll be in the middle of doing something and I'll feel like all of a sudden I'm sensing that I am part of these other people I'm watching, and that my spirit is their spirit, and it's a good feeling, but it's also a little bit unnerving because it takes me a little bit away from what I consider the human experience of being present in my life at this time. And I am finding it a little bit conflicting for me. So I wondered if you might have any insights.
Probably not. If you ask me a direct question, Nikki, then I can respond. I followed what you said. And if you have a question about anything you said, I can do that. But I don't. This isn't an area where we can have a conversation particularly. It has to be more of a call and response kind of thing. It seems to work better for everyone, including the teacher. So if you have a specific question about that, then I can respond to it.
I guess my question then might be, am I somewhat circumventing the experience I am here to have in the natural world by becoming so aware of the one in spirit?
So a lot of assumptions in the question, but so the way you're setting up the question, the only thing I can say is, and I don't mean this to be sarcastic or rude or anything, is yes and no. Because you set it up in such a way that some of that gets a yes. Then there's that other parts, those right around the corner there, they're kind of hanging out there and talking to each other. That's a no. Was the first one a no? Or yes? Do you remember? Memory man? Which one was yes? Which one was no?
First one was yes.
What was the second one?
No.
See? So what I'll say to you, and I'm very biased here. I'm very, very biased. You have to train your mind, and of course, I'm going to go into that bias a little deeper by saying, and you need to do it by sitting still and just watching the craziness of the mind come and go without doing anything with it. Do not interfere with the mind stream based on thinking it is your mind, and you need to somehow become more enlightened or more balanced or more or less crazy or less jealous or less angry or less, more. Don't do that. Sit down, hold still, and just watch the charade, watch the parade, watch the Coney Island of mind. Page 159. Right? That's page 159 in Black Spring, by Henry Miller, published in what, 1932?
6.
Huh?
6.
1936. I stand corrected. Coney Island of the mind. It's entertaining, but it's pretty threatening, especially if you're 4 or 5 years old. In other words, if your mind is, if you've only had 4 or 5 years of mind training, it's going to be threatening. Train your mind. Please, everyone, not just Nikki, but everybody. Train your mind so you get your understanding from what you're looking at, which might not live up to a standard of understanding that you thought you were trying to get to. Buddhism won't help you in that way if you practice it. Well, the way it looks to me, maybe there's a different. Maybe perhaps Thich Nhat Hanh has definitely has a different group of students there, but different way of working with it.
Kayan bowing.
And
in the past, I've heard you say that negative emotion is already wisdom.
Yes.
Is giving that negativity the benefit of the doubt a way of getting a little deeper with it, as you were suggesting to Harrison earlier? Bowing.
I think it is. And going back to the word gullible, it's just like, be willing to be at the mercy. It's not going to hurt you. You're not going to jump off a cliff. Have a willingness to receive that energy. Somebody has to do it. Might as well be you. More? Okay.
Kayan bowing. I had a question about something else.
Okay.
Earlier, you were describing how in the 4 karmas, one might switch into another in a way that was like that was consciousness doing it, not the intellectual faculty.
Yes.
So when you say that consciousness is doing something, what is the engine behind its doing if it has no ontological status? Bowing.
Has no status, but it's not, if it has any status at all, it's the status of not being separate from anything. So it's part of the word I use lately, as of late anyway, is a landslide. Dependent origination coming from the Peloponnesian Wars, 2,500 years ago. Yeah, about around the time of the Buddha. That is still here. That energy is still here. People are born and die, but the energy of that negativity, that warfare, it's still showing up in human form, and probably in the form of muskrats. I don't know. So that we use that, we tighten it up, and we talk about pacifying, softening things up, pacifying, enriching, with the intention of working with energy in such a way that we're not shutting it out, we're not disrespecting it, but we're going to work with it with respect. So we may have to enrich some of that if our basic understanding is one of, as Trungpa Rinpoche used a phrase, which is just bodhicitta, which is basic goodness. In the midst of your worst nightmare, this is basic goodness. I don't know how to explain that other than say, don't give up. Continue to look at your own mind stream, what arises in the mind, without accepting it, without rejecting it, and without turning away from it. So be very, very respectful to what happens in your mind stream. And that way you will be able to see more deeply what's happening to all the people around you, the people in your community, your family, your country. You can see that people are suffering deeply. The ones sometimes that are suffering the most don't even have a clue. They're so good at covering it up. But the right trigger comes along, and that whole volcano is going to explode. Perhaps, maybe not. Nothing, not predicting anything. Go ahead.
Can the algorithm persist without serving the ego?
It may. It may continue. And you may, or I may, or any of us may continue to watch that come and go without interfering. And it's still that algorithm, just like saying, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Or, you know what I'm saying? Those kinds of phrase fillers. So the ego is unreal. That doesn't mean it's going to go away. It still functions with dependent origination. It still could be part of your particular, this body-mind complex, your illusion.
Is disassembling the algorithm just another function of ego, or another way of?
It's a performance, more than likely. If you see it, if you see it completely, then it just tends to dismantle itself. But it also may come storming back in the room at some point. And if you that's why it's so can't really accomplish something, because you're not separate from anything. You're not separate from the worst incident that happened 20 minutes ago that we don't even know about. We're separated, fundamentally not separate. When that starts to show up, you're just, one way of saying it, your heart just breaks. An individual feeling of, I can't do anything about this, can't save anything, can't choke it out. You quoted Zigar Kongpo Rinpoche. What was the quote that you had?
Choke it out, a bodhisattva.
Yeah.
Someone who burns with love in a world that we cannot fix.
Yes. Someone who burns with love in a world we cannot fix. It's a very relative statement about ultimate understanding.
Yuhong Baoyin.
Go ahead, Yuhong. You're next.
I have a follow-up question about Harrison's asking.
You're gonna wait. Let's get permission from Harrison.
Yes.
Is that okay for you, Hung, to do that?
Of course.
Yep. He said sure.
Okay. So you teach us shikantaza. You keep saying just observing, just sitting.
I do.
And one of your teachings, if I recall correctly, you said we're our own teachers, we're our own masters. My question is, are we the ones who know how and when to face, for example, difficulty such as anxiety, and stay with that difficulty and at the same time find resources to to look at this. So if I can ask directly, is that the teaching is that a teaching of we're our own teachers to know how and when to face or not face at the same time to help us? Sorry.
So, as I understand your question, my response is this: keep it on receive as much as you can. Don't move away from the receiving the teacher, receiving the teaching, receiving the community. Try to receive it as long and as much as you can, and don't make a decision to be your own teacher. That will just show up. You'll just see that you have to do this yourself. But that doesn't mean you won't have spent a long time with a teacher. I was before I started functioning like this, sitting on a ton and presuming to tell anybody anything or respond to anyone's questions, was over 30 years of seeing what the function of a teacher actually is. Long time. So I would say, yes, at some point you will be your own teacher, but at that point, if you want to call it a point, there's no identity there. There's intense consciousness about everything. You're receiving everything all the time. You can't walk in a room without being completely drenched by the emotion in the room, which is empty of a self and empty of an other. There's no self there, there's no being there, and there's no otherness there. But you have to see that. That's not a thought. I'm turning it into a thought so that I can say it to you. All of the teachings, not all of them maybe, but most of the teachings that we study here are talking about that, from the works of Dogen Zenji to all the Yogacara teachings, works of Vasubandhu, so on, other teachers, Trungpa Rinpoche.
Yukong, that's very helpful. Actually, I do have difficulty receiving even when I ask the questions. So yes.
Well, that's awareness. That difficulty receiving, that's awareness. You don't have to correct that. Thank you. You just realize that you have to be genuine. I recently had someone come this way, with all kinds of apparent devotion and caring, and looks like this person is over the top going to do this, and then they got right to the point where they're ready to, I'm ready to give them I have their name. I've just never given it to them. They just changed. You can't do this anymore. And so was that wrong? No, they're doing exactly what they need to do. There's nothing to correct. There's nothing to fix. Sometimes I look at that and I'm looking at the relative situation. I'm just as blind as anyone else. But I'm aware that I'm blind from the point of view of seeing deeply into anything. There's always a relative truth shouting at you or me or any of us. Don't do, oh, you can't do that. That can't be true. Well, this must be this way. It must be that way. No, it's a Coney Island of the mind. Enjoy yourself. So this person is, this person is gone. I would say, don't go. Don't make a decision about it. Now, if say that person did make a decision about it, that's still nothing to correct, because the dependent origination that is rising in each person's mind is so powerful. And I don't know what kind of karma that any one of you, I'm looking at anyone, I don't know what is up for you in terms of your karma. I would say, if you can, stay in this, the Buddha's algorithm, the teacher, the teaching, and the community. Don't start teaching yourself too soon. Be a student. Be on receive. How you know you're the way you know you're a student is you don't understand. And how do you know that you're awake? You don't understand. They are not separate. So therefore you can't make a statement that you're awake. If you do, you better be pretty good at it. Almost poetic. Totally poetic. Go ahead.
I'll see that one. If we see someone operating deeply from ego, and it seems really clear to us, and then they don't see it, they're not recognizing their own karmic suffering.
Yes.
Our job is not to fix, there's nothing to fix, and also is simultaneously to help save, right? And so I'm
Right.
noticing my ups and rights. And I'm wondering what is happening in my ego as I'm observing them, and what my job is, if it's not to do anything, but also to do something. Yeah.
So just receive as much as you can, and then when there's when a particular production is either in line for you, however you want to say it, karmically or situationally, you won't be able to stop it. But if you put some tension there, sitting wall gazing will help you do that, because that's what you're doing. You're training yourself to sit still, sit symmetrical, and don't comment. Just receive whatever rises in any of the six sense fields, including the mind. We practice doing that, and then when we get in our everyday situations, then we notice more clearly how crazy we are, how emotions that are starting to arise that we've been able to keep out or shut out through some kind of discursive thought or daydreaming, whatever. So don't do anything unless you have to. Being aware of someone's ego or a seemingly self-centered dynamic that's happening, we don't know what kind of suffering they're covering up with that ego structure. So that's where we need to be really respectful of someone's ego, and respectful, even though we're able to see there a lot of self-centeredness going on. Just be aware of it, and don't do anything with it. Certainly don't. You're functioning as a therapist, so you're getting a different kind of permission from people. And I would assume most of the people, this is an assumption, that come to you are not meditators. And we don't necessarily have to try to get them to meditate, but just meet them where they're at, work with them in the circumstances, which you've already been trained to do that. Isn't that what you basically do? Are you doing things outside of what your training helped you to do? A little bit. You need to talk to Senchu. More?
Not yet.
Sir.
Sean Bowing, what is the function of a teacher? Bowing?
So it's been said classically, the function of the teacher is to mirror back aspects of your confusion and your difficulty, of things that you were deluded by. And how that shows up can be, the teacher could be deliberately saying something to you, and it could appear they're doing that. They might not be even aware they're doing that. So because they are not at war with anything anymore. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're at peace with anything. The positionality is gone. So if you're around someone like that who very difficult to explain, because it's the teaching person is more like somebody who isn't there, and yet if they're with somebody who's there, then they're there too. They're right there with the same kind of monkey wrenches. They're right there because they're meeting everything where it's at, rather than with their own idea about how things should be. So that can be pretty stressful for a teacher, and it can also be extremely stressful for a student. That's why it's so necessary for the conventional word is to have some devotion, some dedication to this path. This is why if any of you that were here for the 3-year anniversary of the Order of Immediate Light, where we went back and went through that ceremony again, the Karmapakshi material and other material, chanting sutras, chanting and doing prostrations, reaffirming that, very simply, just reaffirming that, because it's so easy for it to get scattered and go every direction and think there's a right and wrong, that we need to stop this, start that, control this, control that. Did I get close?
Pashan Bowing, you've talked about the student-teacher relationship before. So what's coming up now for me is, how do we have a relationship with the mirror? Bowing.
How's that going for you now? Who's your teacher?
You are.
Well, you tell me.
Pashan Bowing, it's easier to have a relationship with you when I don't think of you as a teacher.
Yeah, I've noticed. So I teach a little bit different than either one of my teachers. My main teachers taught. You see what that is?
No.
You want me to help you with it?
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Thank you.
I don't know that. You ever talk to a mirror?
Yes.
Good idea. Can you say something about that? I'm asking Chiedon. You say anything about that?
Nothing's showing up right now.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Haushan? Is there, yeah.
I have some questions on YouTube here.
Okay, YouTube.
Thomas in the UK says it's my birthday tomorrow. Is it real?
Of course. It's your birthday. What a question. Yeah, I'm not sure whether you're joking with me or whether you're, of course, it's relatively very, very real. So we have to be respectful. We're not trying to get rid of relative truth. It's time to have a birthday cake. Just celebrate it. Have a good time. Enjoy yourself. How old will you be?
Nothing yet, but I have another question.
Okay.
Milkabali from Deb. Can memory loss be an ego trick to get us to stop sitting, like pain or itching?
Anything can get us to stay away. The self-centered part of the consciousness, ego, or narcissism, or me, and my stuff, my ideas, my opinions, my beliefs, my judgments, my culture, what I've always thought, all of that can find different ways of. It's relentless. Ego is relentless. As long as you think you are someone separate being who can win or lose, live or die, then that's what will take over and run your life. And it might, as you're practicing, you might have to watch your life be run by crazy aspects of the mind. Watch the emotions come and go, clamping down, opening up, and watch the strategy of ego to try to get away from the cushion. Can't do that. That's just, it's too much in my face. I'm just sitting there looking at how I can't sit there, and it will convert over into everything from body pain, not that your body isn't in pain, to mental pain, not that your mind stream isn't suffering, difficult. This is why the Buddha pointed to it. His first teaching, as far as we know, life is suffering because we want something else, and that can come to an end. And the way to do that is to train your mind to see clearly, Shila Samadhi and Prajna, or sitting meditation, having a teacher, having a teaching, and having a community. Further question, or even final question? You say how old he was?
He didn't.
What?
He did not.
Okay.
Bowing.
Harrison, go ahead.
So building off Kelsey's question, well, if you see someone who's acting out of ego, and while our job is not to change that, what if we see that ego hurting the people around them? Like, what is our job then?
Well, again, Harrison, it's very situational. There may be, if it's like your brother or somebody you grew up with, is it your brother? I saw that big smile. So if it's like, then it's going to have a different dynamic to it. You might even, bark at the person. What in the hell are you doing this or this or that? So you may need to. We're not trying to get away and be this kind of holy person who never has any negative feelings or is ever critical of anybody. It's about awareness. I can't stress that enough. It's awareness. And you or me, some person's dynamic may just be not to say too much. Some people, I'm looking at people here and there are people here that are very unlikely to, they could be in extreme pain and they're unlikely to complain about anything. And there are other people right here on the screen or in here, including this person, that whine about everything. I'm always complaining about stuff. I don't like this. I don't like that. You all hear that. It's not about changing it. And it's not about changing any person. It's just about be with all things, and how that shows up for you is extremely individual. If you are doing this correctly, you will not know it. You will not get, it transcends, it goes beyond the relative proof of this is right, this is wrong, or success and failure. And we are completely confused by this because some things are so intensely wrong that we want to have that kind of security around everything we're doing. We know that murdering another human being is wrong. We know that saying something to someone that is not only untrue, but also might hurt somebody. We know that that's wrong. So we try to use that as this is what happens when there's a misunderstanding of the precepts of morality and patience and energy, wisdom, generosity, and so on. It is about observing this, not about aligning yourself with something and making yourself function a certain way. That's the very nature of craziness and confusion, is to insist on anything. What was the phrase that you used? Everything's appropriate. Recently, was that it? Yeah. Everything is appropriate, and what Sokuzan is saying by that is that anything that shows up is appropriate because it's dependently arisen, so it would have to be appropriate. This doesn't mean that we're justifying someone being really upset with someone else and doing some terrible, harmful thing to them, but it's appropriate in that it arose in independent origination, not validating it, not justifying it. But we're going to fundamentally address the suffering of the world, the suffering of others, through understanding of the vow of the Bodhisattvas to be with all things, save all beings, put others before yourself. You might have to look at a whole lot of things that are going in the opposite direction in your own mind stream, where you really, someone's done something and you don't like it, and you have a right to feel, you're being wronged or you're not being treated right. Ego algorithms. There, I ended the talk on the talk title. Is that helpful? No, that's not helpful. Are you expecting something? Okay.
Hi, my name is Sokuzan, and I'm one of Sokuzan's monks. Sokuzan so freely offers his love to us and his wisdom through these talks, and never asks us for anything in return. If you value what he does and what he is, and want them to continue, please visit our donate page at SokukoJi.org. Thank you.